Hello there, my fellow developing developers. I'm back to talk to you about an error that gave me some trouble in my own work this week. Let's say you're at work, you're coding, you're developing for Salesforce in your own little Salesforce developer world, minding your own business. You try to load up a Visualforce component on the Lightning page you're putting together, and then from out of nowhere comes value cannot be converted from text to com.force.swag.soap.DateOnlyWrapper. Let's break that down for a second. Com, force, swag, soap, date only wrapper. Makes sense, right? Hi, I'm William from Smoothstack, here to talk to you about the value cannot be converted from text to com.force.swag.soap.DateOnlyWrapper error. What this error really means is that something in your Visualforce code is expecting something with the date data type, but instead it's getting text. When your code tries to use that text data, it's like trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. What can you do to fit a round peg into a square hole? You have a few options. You can either make the hole itself round, make the peg square, or use some kind of round to square adapter to make the peg fit into the hole. Get what I'm saying here? You can either change the Visualforce code to accept text, change the data in Salesforce to a date type, or convert the text from Salesforce into a date ad hoc so Visualforce can use it. All options are equally valid, and you may have to use different ones depending on the situation and your company's needs. I'll be going over all three of those options today. As an example, let's say that we have this contact record page in our org that's meant to display contact info for employees in our org. Included with the record page is a virtual replica of the employee's ID card. The ID card is very simple. It's just a Visualforce page inside of a Lightning Web component, where the Visualforce page just contains this Visualforce component that's meant to display the employee's name, the employee number, and their start date, the date that they started at the company. Let's load up the page, and here is the exact error that we've been talking about. Value July 8th, 2013 cannot be converted from text to com.force.swag.soap.DateOnlyWrapper. This instance of the error is also very helpful and tells you what expression caused the error. Let's demo the first and simplest way around the error. Change the Visualforce attribute to a text type. Let's go into the Visualforce page that our Lightning page is displaying, and we see that the page is just the employee ID card component. Going over to the actual component file, we see that the start date output corresponds to, so this start date output right here toward the bottom, it corresponds to this attribute up here toward the top. And here we see that the attribute is, as expected, of the date type. So all we have to do here is change date to string. Then we deploy. So now we just reload the page in our org. And there we go. The employee ID card is right there on the page, ready to go. So that's our first way around the error. But maybe we can't actually change the attribute type. Maybe in real life, you'll be working with a complicated and important custom component for your company where everyone else needs this data attribute to be of the date type, even if it's not optimal for you. In that case, the next best thing would be to change the Salesforce field you're using. The equivalent of making the round peg into a square peg so it can fit into the square hole. Since we're changing a field type, first we should cut out all references to that field in our custom code. So going into VS Code, I'm going to cut out this line, followed by this line. Gonna deploy that. Then I'm going to cut out this line. Then deploy. Then open up your org. Go to Setup. Go to Object Manager. Search for the name of the object. In this case, contact. Fields and relationships. Search for the field name, start date in this case. Click Start Date, Edit, change field type, and now change from text to date. Now remember, changing the field type wipes all the data stored in that field all across the org. Hopefully in real life you're not working directly in production, but just remember that this could have implications for any test data your company may have. So we hit OK, then Next, then Save. Then we add the code we just cut out back in. So adding this stuff back in, deploy, add it back into the page, then deploy. Then we return to our org, refresh the page, and right now there's no start date because the data for the start date field was all wiped just now. So all we have to do is put in a new start date, save, and Bob's your uncle. Here we are. We are back to having a date on our employee ID card component. Awesome. Before we go on, let's do a quick knowledge check. Which two of these four statements are true about changing a field type in Salesforce? A. References to that field in custom code should be deleted or commented out beforehand. B. Changing the field type uses 100 SOQL queries, so be mindful of governor limits. C. Data in that field is generally wiped on changing. Or D. You need a cup of coffee for a caffeine boost beforehand. Feel free to pause the video for a minute while you think about it. All right, if you picked A and C, you're right. D is wrong because as a developer, you should have already gotten your caffeine boost for the day before you even opened up Salesforce. Maybe you can't change your Visualforce attribute or your Salesforce field. Maybe the attribute needs to be a date and the field needs to be text for everyone else's work. In that case, another option would be to adapt the Salesforce field from text to a date ad hoc. We can do this by using an extension controller on the Visualforce page that will convert the text data from the contact object in Salesforce into the form we need. There are lots of written resources online that will tell you how to build an extension controller, but basically, to make this extension controller, you make a public class with sharing. This class will have an instance of contact along with any other variables we need, declared as private final variables. It will have a public constructor that takes apex pages.standard controller as a parameter, and that standard controller will have its getRecord method used to retrieve the contact record for the Lightning record page that we put our component on. This getRecord method will only retrieve fields that are referenced on the page file, that this class is an extension for. So the best way to make sure that the start date on contact gets retrieved is to put an invisible reference to the contact start date field on the page, like so. It's an output text with our field as the value that doesn't actually get rendered. Rendered equals false, so it's basically invisible. And while we're here, let's make sure the extensions attribute is in with the name of the extension controller as the value. So once we retrieved our start date field into the extension controller, we basically use Apex to reformat the text into month, day, year format. And then once that's done, uh, date.parse will convert it into an actual piece of date data that our component can display. Then we use a getter method with a name in the format of getVariable that takes no parameters and just returns the variable that we need. This method is referenced with exclamation mark variable in the page file. And so from there, now that we put this together, we make sure everything is deployed. So then we just open up our org again, and voila, we've converted our text field that was in the database into a date that we can display on our component. One last way that you could work around this error would be to clone the Visualforce page and component, and then conduct the first fix I showed you on the clone. So all you have to do is create a new page and component, give them unique names, copy and paste the old code in, and then from there you change the date attribute to a string like I showed you. Cloning the code gives you your own version of it that you can play around with without affecting other people's work. And then you make sure that your newly created Visualforce page can actually be displayed on a Lightning Web component by going into your org, setup, searching for Visualforce pages, click the Visualforce page you created, click Edit. Make sure that available for Lightning Experience Builder sites, and the mobile app is checked off. And from there, you should be able to put your cloned page on a Lightning Web component, just like any other Visualforce page. For this error, we've gone over a lot of potential solutions. Basically, it's a mismatch between the data being sent from Salesforce and what the Visualforce is expecting. You can fix it by changing the Visualforce attribute, changing the Salesforce field, or by changing the Salesforce field data into what the Visualforce is expecting ad hoc using an extension controller. Or you can fix it by cloning the component along with the page and just performing the first fix that I mentioned. Did you find any other ways to fix the date wrapper only error? You can let me know in the comments. We're running out of time right now, but thanks so much for listening. Until next time, my developing developers.